As a result of the completion of the Bay Bridge into Costanoa, the county has seen an unprecedented increase in traffic in the area. The Costanoa Municipal Transit Authority, or CMTA, has been working on a proposal to introduce a tram line originating at the train station in Costanoa and working its way to Baymont, all the while setting up the outskirts of town for future expansion. This represents the first stage of a broader plan to expand the county's transit system, and in the future, the CMTA is looking to leverage the knowledge and industry connections they gather to replace the most popular bus lines with trams and use this as an opportunity to rethink the county's bus system. In addition to this, the Costanoa Public Utilities Commission is expanding its communication services to better accommodate the growing needs of the county. So in this episode, we'll be setting up the county for sustainable expansion by finding a logical location for a tram depot and building the county's first tram line. So I've got the game paused here for a few reasons. Some of you may have noticed last episode that I've got a pretty big traffic jam happening right here. And this is something I tried to fix with the stoplights here, but as we can see, it was very limited in its success. I still think the stoplight is generally a good idea, and I think that would happen right there. The thing that I'm, facing is that I don't really have another way to get off of the highway up until all the way over here. And I think a lot of people are using this exit to get all the way over to Baymont through town. And that's not really something I want. I want to avoid that. So what I'm going to end up having to do is probably go somewhere around this area and add another off-ramp. And that'll allow people to get more directly over to the bypass highway over here. So that's one thing that I noticed. And then the other thing that I'm noticing is I got a lot of these not enough customer symbols. If we just zoom in on one of these, it's definitely going to be electronics. I can see electronics. Click on one over here, electronics. So I have to do something about that. The thing I'll do about that is just tax the heck out of them. I've already been doing a little bit of that, but this is kind of going to help me in two different ways. So one is it'll help me get a lot more money per hour. And that's going to be something that I need, because what I'm going to end up doing is I am going to have to purchase a lot of tiles for the build today. So I mentioned this traffic jam right here and people wanting to get to Baymont. I think another solution to that, so it'll be kind of twofold. So the one side will be I'm going to have another off-ramp here. But the other thing that I think will help is I'm going to be putting in a tram that goes from around this train station all the way over to Baymont. And while that might not take any of the traffic away coming from this direction, what it might do is it might make the highways going towards Baymont, so that would be like this one, and then also this one. It might make those highways a little bit less trafficked. So it's kind of just a move to make the traffic system overall more healthy. So with that out of the way, I think I can unpause. And another thing I wanted to look at the budget was our service budget is pretty high, and particularly for healthcare. So if I take a look actually at our info view for healthcare, I can see that our capacity is like way higher than it needs to be. And that's because I put in those county facilities. So I have 800 capacity, but I'm not using nearly all of it. So I can go ahead and I'll just reduce this hopefully just for this episode. But yeah, like I mentioned, I do want to make sure I'm pulling in enough money to do the things I want to today. So before I start building things, I do actually want to get a value for the amount of people who are using our public transportation system per month. So right now that is 26,502, and that's including taxis, buses, and our trains. A lot of that is going on buses, and I surmise that a lot of that is actually going from Costanoa over here all the way to Baymont. But I just wanted to have an idea of where we're starting and then where we'll end once we have the tram in. And then next, I do have to actually make sure that I have trams unlocked. So we'll go over here into the development tab and unlock trams. And then I can start thinking about where am I going to place the tram depot. So I've done a little bit of the work offline, and I think the most logical place to have this happen is somewhere in this area because it's close to the city. There's also a lot of available land, and the land that's available is not necessarily the most desirable. So like next to these rail tracks and then next to the freeway here, not necessarily the most desirable land. So the way I see it, it's probably inexpensive land and it doesn't have a lot of use cases. So using it for a public service is probably as good of a use as I can find for it, at least right now. And there's a couple spots in here that I think are valid. So one would be like on this side of the track over here. The reason I wouldn't want to do that, and let me show you what I'm kind of thinking here with our depot. The reason I don't want to put it here is because you can see the track goes up right next to the train track right here. And then I'm gonna have to cross over the train track because my intention is to bring the train track this way, sorry, the tram track this way, and then bring it up here in front of the train station and then over to Baymont on its way that way. So I kind of want to minimize that rail crossing. I mean, we already have this at grade crossing and I want to just minimize traffic that's coming through here. So the alternative is to place it somewhere on this side, I think, and I can actually place it really nicely right here. But I actually think this block right here is pretty good land. Like, it's not too close to our train depot here, and it's not too close to the rail line here, and it is close to our train station here. So I kind of don't want to use up that land, which leaves me then with this spot here. And I think this is probably the best spot, but the one issue is that the train line is in the way. And of course I could, you know, install the anarchy mod and then just push it in myself. But I think what I'd rather do is I'm just gonna redo this section of the rail line and push it back a little bit so that we have enough space for the tram depot. And there it is. I think it barely looks really much different. I mean, if you didn't know that that happened, you probably wouldn't even be able to notice, but obviously you can see that this part of the rail line is a little bit curvy, but that's okay. I think it's always nice to have just a little bit of added visual interest, and like there's a reason that that jaunt exists, so that's always a pretty fun thing for me. The other thing I want to do now is I want to make sure this is connected up to this road right here. The reason for that is that this is the road that passes in front of our rail station. I also want to make sure that I don't have these crosswalks right here, so I'll kind of get all of that out in one go. Final thing I want to do is I actually want to make sure that I have a stoplight right here. I think that'll just be helpful because we'll have these trams coming out of here. It's something I think would probably realistically happen in this scenario. You could even time the light to work with the trams, you know, so every time a tram's coming through, you might have a green light here and then a red light here, something along those lines. So you can see now that our tram goes up until here, but I'm going to leave that there for a second because we do still have this massive backup over here and it's still going all the way to the bridge. This isn't like, you know, it's not so crazy to see this kind of backup, especially at rush hour. This is a pretty realistic amount of backup, I'd say, in San Francisco. Actually, it's only unrealistic in the sense that the backup would probably be all the way back across to the bridge on this side. But, you know, for the amount of people here, obviously there's a lot less people than in San Francisco. So anyways, the thing I want to do is I just want to make sure that I get in the off-ramp over here. So I want to take a second to kind of explain what I did there. So I initially had to remove this segment of the freeway and then rebuild it as 3 lanes because when I went to upgrade it, it just didn't allow me to. And I wanted to have enough space for my off ramp. I think this is honestly not enough space. I'd rather have more, but I think the game's going to give me a little bit of trouble if I try to extend it out all the way to there. And you know what? I'm just going to try it. I may regret doing this, but let's see if it works really quick. If I can get a third line in there, I'd be happy. All right, and I was definitely not able to get that third line in, but worth a try, I suppose. Anyways, I wanted that third lane in there so I could extend the off-ramp a little bit, but I think it's kind of fine the way it is. I hope it doesn't cause too much backup, but the way I built this was kind of difficult. I did this a few different times, like a few different ways, and I found that the best way to do it was to have a straight segment coming in here, and then to just connect things up over here. There's not a ton of space right here, so this is going to end up being pretty steep, and I actually really don't like what it's doing there, so I'm going to have to fix that, but I think the challenge is actually to get from here and then down over this road right there. The other option is doing some sort of loop, but I think at that point it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Like, you're gonna have to slow down so much anyways that having the loop is kind of redundant in my opinion. So let me get this one segment done and then we'll get back over to our trams. Okay, and I'm happy with that. We can take a look at the side. Yeah, it looks a lot better. It's a lot smoother of a slope between here. And then on this side, I've raised up the hill a little bit more, but I think it's pretty reasonable given the circumstances we have. I would be a little bit worried about how fast people are coming off of here, but that is why I added in this stoplight right here. And now we can start thinking about where this tram goes. So I know that I want it to pass by the train station right here. And probably at some point in the future, I'd like it to go down Market Street here into our downtown, but that's going to be a project for a later day. What I'm really focused on here is I want to make sure I have this train station connected up to Baymont so that I can get anyone who's coming into town by the train into Baymont a little bit more easily. And hopefully that reduces the amount of traffic burden on the rest of our highways. So if I want to get over to Baymont, there's a couple different options from here. So I'll probably go over to Market Street, which is right in this area. And let me make this a little bit bigger so hopefully you can see a little bit easier. Yeah, so Market Street right in this area. And then I'm going to come up Market Street to about here. And what I want to do is I actually want to go up this hill here because it's pretty gradual. And as well, I can make a pretty straight shot up until this other highway, which is right here. So I'm going to make a connection into there somewhere around here. The reason I want to go here is so that I can actually bring the tram line over this way between these two hills and then down into Baymont right over here. So this is a good area to come in because it comes right by the university, and a lot of people who are coming into Baymont are most likely going to be going into either like that university or they'll be going into our downtown core here. So once I come in here, I can easily bring the tram line along this road until here, and I can bring it all the way down and then loop around here. So that's the plan. I think the biggest thing will be I have to buy a lot of tiles for this, and we can even take a look now about how much that's going to cost. So I think it's all of these tiles right here, which we do have the money for. I'm gonna have to be pretty careful though, because obviously that's gonna, run us over budget. So I don't want to buy everything all at once. What I'll do first is I'll actually just buy up until here and see if I can get away with just those. I might have to buy that one as well. Let me take a look. And yeah, I can get away with not having this tile right here, I think. So I'll avoid buying that one, and then hopefully that will be enough. Okay, so now I want to make sure that I am getting our tram track from here all the way over here and then onto Market Street until this intersection right here, and then I'll decide what is next. So what I'm thinking over here is it's going to depend all on the terrain, and I actually want to go about until here because you can see that the terrain lines get a little bit closer here. So I want to allow myself some space to get up here. So I'll go pretty much straight shot from here all the way down. And then that will be a new, I guess like a collector road, most likely. I want to use one of these 4-lane divided roads. And that will, I think have only 2 lanes of traffic once the tram is in there. So that's part of the reason I wanted to use it. I also think it's just nicer to have a fewer larger roads. It looks a little bit more natural to have some larger roads, even though I don't necessarily love them. But yeah, like, you know, big cities have big roads. So yeah, I want to bring that in, I think about here. And I'm not going to worry too much about this being perfect. I kind of want it to look, you know, a little bit more natural. Really what I'm focused on is getting up this hill in a very gradual way. So you can see like our contour lines are very gradual. I think it was around a little bit over 1% grade. So that is perfect for me. And then what I can do now is just bring our tram track up through here. And this is going to be a problem. I don't want that to be like that. That node is a little bit too close. So let me fix that up a little bit. All right, much better. And then this will go all the way over here. And I'm gonna have to decide exactly how I want to connect this up. So that's gonna be the challenging part, is getting from here to here in a more gradual way. I don't wanna just go straight up because I think we'll get probably close to 4 or 5% grade. And that's a totally acceptable like grade. Yeah, so 4%. And then I think at the highs it's probably, yeah, 6%. Like 6% is totally fine. I wouldn't, you know, say that you have to get lower than that necessarily, but I like my roads to be just a little bit, you know, less steep. Part of the reason for that is because I love to bike, and biking up some of the like crazy inclines in San Francisco can be a little bit, you know, harrowing, and coming down them can also be quite scary when you're going so fast. So I have a preference for streets that are a little bit more gradual. But anyways, I think the next step is, well, first unpausing, and then I want to come up here. And I mentioned going this way. I also kind of noticed that this is kind of this like awkwardly curvy section, and there's not a great reason for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine where this tram road goes, and let me get the contour lines up. I want to see what kind of grade we have. 4.9 is probably okay. It might make sense to kind of go up at kind of an angle here. Yeah, so I think it makes sense to kind of go like this direction. So let me do a little bit of pre-grading, fix this highway, and then I'll get started on putting that tram line in. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to come back over here, and I've got this, you know, I can get a nice 90 in here. That's kind of a big reason for why I did that. So I want to look at 2 things. So one, I mentioned kind of going up this way. That I think is still possible. I think we can start that right here. The other thing I want to think about is how do I get down to here? And I think what I'll do is I'll kind of make like an S curve that goes up here. So I'll work on the upper segment first, because I think that's going to be a little bit easier, and I think that makes sense to start from there. I think what I'll do is I'll take this particular contour line here. I'm going to extend things out around here, and then I'm just going to use the slope tool, and I'll probably have to buy this. I'll go ahead and do that now. I am seeing that we're losing a bit of money now, but that's fine for now. We still have enough left over to at least get this segment of the project done. And now with this, what I want to do is actually come here and find a contour line up here that I want to meet on. And it's definitely going to be this one. So let me kind of flatten out this pad just a bit. Now that that's in there, I can go ahead and first smooth this terrain out because I didn't do that. And then I'll put in the tram track and get it up to here. And I kind of want to start thinking too about where it goes after that. I think it would be nice to maybe follow this hill up here and then start working our way down. It might be helpful though to start working our way down sooner because it will have more space. I'll kind of figure that out once I get up to, let's say, this section here. So I can place my road down, and then I'll figure out from there. And now that the tram track is in, I'll start thinking about how I can get this road up to here. So that's going to start by first, let's level this area out here just a little bit. And then I'll kind of create two different paths. So one will probably be, let's say up here is going to be one. So that's going to be where I'm going to go to first. And then I'll turn around and swing back this way and go up here. So all I have to do now is kind of just create my slopes between those two areas. And I'm seeing that that's just over a 5% grade. I don't love that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up a few meters. And then I'll just do the same thing with my sloping. And then that makes it 3.5, which is a lot more favorable. And I like that a lot more. So up next, I'm going to do the same thing. And hopefully this gets me there gradually enough. Going to require a little bit of extra work too. Just because it's like I'm like curving things, you know, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to make these changes. Kind of have to piecemeal it together and figure out the best way to do it. Generally, that's, you know, just taking a few different passes over things. That's 5.2, not great. I'd like it to be a little bit lower. Let's see if I can accomplish that. What I'll probably have to do is maybe I'll just pull this back a little bit and I'll start making that grade change a little bit sooner. And I think at this point, it makes sense to actually kind of check our work and review what I've done here, especially in this area. I want to get in close and see that, you know, it doesn't go too crazy anywhere. And it looks pretty good, actually. So I think that is good enough for me. What I do want to do is actually pull this back a little bit and redo a little bit of the terraforming now that I have a better idea of where things are going. And once again, I'll just check my work really quick. And I think that looks a little bit better. This is still a bit of a tight curve, but I'm okay with it. I think it's just part of getting up a hill like this in a gradual way. And it'll add a little bit of visual interest, which is never a bad thing. Well, I never say never, but probably not a bad thing in this particular case. And then lastly, let's just add in our tram lines. Okay, and you'll probably notice too that I stopped the road right here and I started using just a regular tram line. And that's because I anticipate that this area back here will much more sooner develop because Costanoa, which is a larger city, is encroaching kind of towards this area. It's also a very like relatively flat pad. I mean, it's not flat, but the gradient is very mild. So I like that. And then over here, I don't really expect much development in this particular area just yet, but it is nice to preserve some of that right of way. So that's kind of the idea here, is the right of way is being preserved in order for me to later down the line probably put in this exact road through here and then have a similar development pattern as occurred over here. And on this side, it's going to kind of be like a streetcar suburb sort of thing going on. And the same will apply over here. It's really going to be an area that develops around this tram system. So I'm pretty excited for that. I think I want to continue that sort of a development pattern over in this area as well with another tram line that comes around this way. But yeah, that's kind of a way off into the future. But those are the kind of things that I tend to think about when I am playing. Like, I don't want to just make a decision that is very one-dimensional and I'm only thinking about what's going to happen right now. I want to think about like, where is this decision going to go in the future? And what is that going to mean for the city going forward more broadly? So I would encourage you to think about those kinds of things as well. It really helps kind of have, it helps to have, you know, like some sort of vision as to where your city is heading in the future. It can also help you to get kind of more excited about continuing out your builds and sticking with things. So yeah, it's something I'm certainly excited about is trams and trains. So that's kind of thinking there. Let me just smooth things out here. I know there's a lot of contention in the community about whether these types of slopes should be smoothed out, or if they should be left a little bit more craggly. I don't know if that's a word, but left to look more like cliffs. In this case, I don't think what I did was too severe, so I think it's fine to kind of smooth things out. I also think that in real life, like, you have so many different tools at your disposal versus in the game. Like, I'm very limited in what I can do on a landscaping front, like in terms of terraforming. So I don't try to get too bogged down in that sort of a detail. I do like the way that this looks generally, so that's kind of why I'm sticking with it. But I would encourage you to let me know what you think of that kind of stuff in the comments. Okay, and I'm overall satisfied with the way that that looks. The last thing we have to do, and I hope I have enough money for this, is go over here, and I do have enough money. Let me just do this quickly and get things in place, because I think I'm gonna start running out of money real quick. Like, so the next step is going to be just getting down all of this terrain, and this is something I mentioned before. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get down, and I don't want to do it all at once. But if we kind of take a look at the terrain, I think like this particular area right here, coming down this hill right here, is probably the best bet. So going from about here down this way all the way down to here. So when I think about like putting in tram lines or roads or rail into a space that has a lot of terrain, the things I look for are like, where are the tops of hills and where are the bottoms of hills, and what is the maximum distance I can achieve between those two things, because then you get the lowest average slope. So I think it's pretty intuitive, but it does help to like explicitly look at a piece of terrain and like start thinking about those things. Like, we can see the average slope here of 3.4 is quite nice. Of course, even if you just go right here, that's all of a sudden 8%, and even just this is probably pretty high at 4%. So we want to essentially extend that gradient out as much as possible. So I think that's the best place to do it. Any sort of like terrain like this, I'm just going to flatten it on the assumption that that terrain that we just flattened, that dirt can be used elsewhere in the project. So another thing I tend to think a little bit about is like, what resources am I using, and like, where am I getting those resources, and how can they be used in other places in the project? I think that's like a pretty realistic way to think about projects in cities. So let me get to that. I think the first thing I want to do is just extend this out a little bit so I can get a better idea of where it's heading right now. Okay, and I generally like what's happened there. I think if I come down here and kind of look out this way, I can see a path forming that brings me down to here. The challenge here is I'd like to minimize the amount of damage I'm doing to the terrain and like kind of its overall shape. So this is where, leveling out a pad like this and kind of going incrementally will help me a lot. So I want to think about like, where are the places that I am trying to get to, and then can I make use of the terrain in a, meaningful way to get there in a way that looks natural. So I think a lot of it's just making sure things look natural. So like kind of extending this hill down a little bit will end up looking pretty natural once I, get everything in there and then terraform it. If we can take a look at the slope here, 4.5%, it's not great. I think I'd like it to be a little bit lower. So, that's just a scenario where I come back in and then I, redo things a little bit. So a little bit of trial and error. I do find this process to be fun, and it forces you to like actually think about where you're placing your infrastructure. One of the things, like one of my gripes, I guess, with mods and essentially overusing mods is that you can fall into a pattern where you just kind of like place things in, don't really think about conforming to terrain, don't really think about like what is a realistic way for this to actually come to fruition. Like, how would this actually happen in real life? Certainly like totally fine to play whatever way you want to play the game. But yeah, if you're interested in that like play style, I would definitely encourage you to minimize mod use for that reason. I've probably been yapping enough, so I'm just gonna finish off the rest of this. I think you get the general idea of what I'm doing. now after all the grading is done, I don't really think that this hill looks too much different than it did before. I think the biggest difference is probably like right in here. This is a pretty steep area, and to kind of cut down it required me to change the landscape just a little bit. But I think overall, our grades here are not too crazy. I think this one, I want to say it was 3%, but it looks a little bit more than that. Let me double check that really quick. It is 3.6%. That's not totally unreasonable. The thing is, like, at some point, like, I do have to get down this hill, you know? So like, as much as I'd like these gradients to be lower than 3.6%, at a certain point, like, that's kind of the best I can do given the landscape. But I am pretty happy with how this whole thing is looking right now. So the last piece is just going to be to bring this in to our roundabout right here. I think what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to have this come in at a 90. So let's get that going. Just bring some of this land back here. What I mean by that is like coming out of this at a 90. I also know that I have to change the type of roundabout we have here to just a regular old medium roundabout. Otherwise, the tram line won't be able to go through. So let me get that on the other side first, and then I will bring the tram line out from the center here at a 90-degree angle. Okay, and then from here where I want to go is I want to bring this into downtown Baymont, and I'm gonna have a few troubles when I get there, and you'll see that right now. These buildings are just gonna delete themselves. I don't know a way around that. Those ones that were in yellow, you can see right here now, they're building up again. There's one over there. It just kind of seems to happen at random that when you place these things down, especially with these wall-to-wall buildings, they don't play very nicely. I don't know, I can't worry too much about it, but the thing that I want to do once I get to this intersection is I actually want to go in this direction over to there, and then I want to come down here and go along this one way in this direction and then back up. So that's going to be my turnaround loop. The reason I went there is that now I can add in a stop much closer to the bus station here. So it's another, you know, transit node that I can connect into. So I think at this point we have everything connected. Let me double check, come all the way back through here, but it should be good to go here and get some vehicles out. I believe we do have everything connected in. So let me get going on that. So what I want to do, I think, do I have to create the stops? Yeah, I do have to create the stops. So I'll come in here. I'm going to just, I don't know if these stops are indifferent, but I'll use an EU one here. And where would I like that to go in? Where would I like this to stop is the real question. I could stop it here, but things are a little bit cramped. So I think I'd rather stop it over here if possible. It does seem to not like what I'm doing. It says overlapping items. I think I have to just kind of be okay with that. And I'd like it to stop maybe like right here next to this path. So that allows people to kind of join in on this path network. They can turn around and then they can go this way over to the bus station. And then our other stop, let's say right in here. And I just noticed something that I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to create a turnaround loop in this area too. So I think with all of that in there, I can now actually just hook this up all the way over here. And at the moment, this is only gonna be basically just pinging between these two places. I will in the future add more lines, but I think for right now, I just wanna get this system moving, and then I can kind of reassess and see like where are some other places that might be good to have a tram. So the other thing I want to check is we go over to our info view tab and click on public transit. Of course, I don't have anyone using my trams yet, but I want to check on the line and see, well, first we have to give it a name, but also I want to see like how many trams it has on it. 7 seems kind of insane to me. I know it'll get a lot of use, but I just think like that is way too many. 12 is definitely too many, so I may eat my words on that, but I think I want to reduce this to say, let's just do 6, go all the way down. There's no reason to put too many on there just yet. The ticket price, I think I want it to be like comparable to the bus, but a little bit more. So let me check what the bus has. Oh, my buses are 2. Let's make trams just 3, I think. I will keep the color as is for now. And then the name, I think I'll just go with letters for this. Like this will be CMTA-A, which is, I guess, kind of a mouthful. So maybe I'll even just like, it'll be kind of a quirk of the system that this starts at CMTA-B. And like partially that stands for Baymont, but also because CMTA-A is just kind of a weird name. I actually now want to check in on a few services. So first I want to come back here because I see a lot of things going on over here. We got a lot of traffic. I think that's kind of okay with me. And then a crash. And then we have a need for some ambulances, which is probably me basically, yeah, charging a bunch for ambulances right now, or cutting services rather. Here we've got electronics still going kind of wild. Like these need to stop being a thing. I know this is a recent update kind of is causing this to happen. So basically I think what needs to happen, and it's already happening a little bit actually, is that I need to just like pick all the taxes from electronics until it evens out a little bit, and then I can, you know, normalize my taxes. But I think a big reason for this monthly balance is that I'm not getting as many taxes as I was at the beginning of the episode. But like you can see, this number is creeping down a little bit. It was at like 800,000 before, but now much lower. Anyways, there's some particular services I'm interested in improving. So they're both in the communication tab. One is post, and we can see why. So I've really neglected to add in like any post offices or any mailboxes. So I want to add in one post office in this area, and I think that'll be a nice addition. I think that goes in nicely in probably right here. Let me get a little bit of a look at what we have here. Yeah, I like that right there. I think that is good enough, and coincidentally cost me a boatload of money, but yeah, that pretty much covers the rest of Costanoa. And I think Baymont is already well covered. Yeah, so Baymont is well served. We don't need to worry about that anymore. The other is telecom, and it's a similar area that is, I suppose, underserved. I'm now seeing actually that this road can connect in. Let me do that really quick. And I think I can get a telecom tower somewhere in this particular area. And let's see which one's cheaper. They're both about the same. I think this one looks a little bit better if we can take a look. They look similar. This one has a bigger footprint. Let me get rid of that. So this is a pretty reasonable area to have this, I believe. I don't want it to be on this corner either though. And I've got this facility here. So I actually think it might just make sense to double up here. And let's go on this side. And I'm pretty glad with how this is working out, because now this has opened up kind of this whole block here for development. I can extend these streets through. I can make maybe a more interesting development pattern here, interesting street network. But because this is kind of all connected up, and in the future we'll have tram stops going this way. Yeah, I think this just ends up being like one of the next places to develop would be right around here. So part of the reason that I did the communication services expansion right there is because I wanted to allow for some time for the trams to be able to pick up some passengers. And I came over here to kind of check out what's going on, and I have the game paused right now. But once I unpause it, you'll see this like empty tram. I think it might even be 2 empty trams. Yeah, 2 empty trams passing by what looks like, yeah, 127 people. So 127 people here still waiting. I'm wondering maybe if this one will pick people up. So I guess the conclusion there is I might have to let things run for a bit. Looks like this one is picking people up. Yeah, so people are getting in that one. So I'll let things simulate out a little bit further here before I make any conclusions on the changes in our transit system utilization. All right, and I think things have stabilized at this point. A quick note on how I think I know that is I saw this number right here, this 3,184. I saw it shoot up to about 3,300, and now it's going down a little bit. So that to me is just telling me it's probably stabilizing. It overshot a little bit, and now it's stabilizing to closer to its final value, at least for this episode. I want to note one thing. I do see that I am very much so in debt right now. I'm in debt, and I'm also just losing money. I'm not going to worry about that for the rest of this episode. Also, people are leaving. Understandably, there's no money to go around. Like I said, I just don't want to focus on that in this episode. So I'm just going to close things out and do a quick review of our numbers here. So not that surprising. We have the same amount of people coming in on taxis. I didn't really expect that to change very much. The buses are also pretty much unchanged, which I'm actually kind of surprised by. It is a little bit lower. by, it looks like about 700, but I would have expected that to be actually quite significantly lower, because my expectation at least was that the people taking the bus from Costanoa to Baymont and back and forth would have switched up to the tram. But interestingly, it just seems like the tram passengers are a lot of new passengers, it seems. And I'm also kind of surprised that the number of train passengers is pretty much unchanged as well. It also went down by about 300, and I was expecting that to actually increase with the additional connectivity of the tram. But in the end, I am glad that we have, about 2,000 more people taking the tram instead of, either getting into their cars. I think that's where a lot of the difference is, that people just are not driving their cars as frequently. Ultimately, though, I think things probably have to shake out a little bit more and probably simulate quite a bit longer in order to see the long-term effects. The other thing is I'll probably be adding in zoning around the new tram line, as well as rethinking my transit system overall with this new tool in our transit toolbox. But I do think I'm going to leave it there for now. I am very excited about all the build opportunities that this creates. The big one being the addition of streetcar suburbs along the tram line, but also because I am very much so in the red on the budget, I'm thinking about other projects that are more geared towards increasing productivity and tax income in the city. But those are all problems for future me to handle. So that's going to do it for this one, and I will see you in the next one.